Hey, welcome back to Road Tripping with Rachel. I'm Rachel. Thank you so much for joining me here on this road trip. If you are new to the channel, we have been working our way through the book of Nehemiah, which is where the people of Israel had been in Babylon during the Babylonian captivity, and they are now returning to the land. They did that in some of the minor prophets like in Zechariah, and then it is being recorded now through Nehemiah, and eventually will also be recorded through the book of Ezra. But Nehemiah really focuses in on the rebuilding of the city, especially like the walls that surround the city, as that led to their defenses. But now we are going to be taking a closer look at Nehemiah chapter 5. And as I read through Nehemiah chapter 5, which I really hope you have been reading along with me, and that this is helping you either in your personal Bible study or through a small group or just a study you're doing with a couple of friends. But chapter 5 really focused in my opinion, on how God gives us principles for interacting with other people. Now, as we've been going through Nehemiah, we've been seeing a lot that has to do with administration and with ministry. And I still think that is really what is happening here. From a very administrative standpoint, that is my very natural bent. I have served in a director capacity. I have been in sales positions where I have had to sell. I've done trainings and different things for people and different companies that I have worked for. So the administration bent, it really does speak to me. And I think there are really 3 principles that God gives us to really take into consideration, not just for people who are natural like administrators, although I really think that is a good bent that Nehemiah has, but it is also something that we should be considering just as Christians in general. So the first one, like principle that I really saw, was that we need to be generous to people who truly need help. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't be generous at all. What I really mean is that sometimes there are those people who need more help than others. And even though both do need assistance, sometimes you do have to pick and choose. And that you should be generous whenever you can be generous. So I think one of the first things that Nehemiah really gets at here is you need to know the difference between a want versus a need. You know, if we go to verses 2 and 3 here, some were saying, our sons and our daughters are numerous. Let us get grain so that we can eat and live. Others were saying, we are mortgaging our fields, vineyards, and homes to get grain during the famine. Now, within that's a little outside of context, like just having me read it. But if you read it within context, you would know that the people of Israel as a whole, because remember, they are now basically a city-state right now, or a province of Persia at this particular moment in time. And so that means you have your normal people who live their day-to-day lives, scratching out a living, and you also have those people who are upper civil servants who are getting a paycheck from Persia, and they get money from taxes, and it's a different breakdown than how we really think of it. I mean, nowadays you think of a civil servant like a police officer, a firefighter, secretaries, anyone who's at the local or mid-government level, the National Park Service, anything like that. You tend to think of it as like they are vastly underpaid, which is true. Vastly underpaid. I highly appreciate the Missouri Department of Transportation, because they fix the roads for the most part, can always do better. However, I also know that in many ways their hands are tied. I accept this, and yes, I will still complain about it whenever I hit a pothole. That's just the way it is. Back in the day, you weren't the sole person responsible for having to, grow your food and harvest your food and take care of the animals. Although you still did that, you had a regular source of income whenever you were a civil servant. So at this particular point in time, what is really being brought to light here within this context, within this passage, is that you had the lower class and you had the upper class. You had no middle class. It didn't exist. So you had the people who are of the poor class, and they were like, we're having to indenture our children so we can buy food. We are having to mortgage our fields, which are theirs. They inherited them. And we're having to pay exorbitant interest fees to the people who have money, which may or may not have been a civil servant. It could have been someone who just got lucky enough that they got into trading and they were able to amass wealth separately. But you have Israelites who were mortgaging their fields and their ancestral land to other people and then paying all this cost, which if we were to backtrack and go back to Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and all through Deuteronomy, we would see that that was a big no-no. And as we're looking at this, know the difference between wants and needs here. So they're indenturing their children. They are mortgaging their fields. Within context, yes, their children are going into a form of bondage. However, indentured servitude is different from slavery. Some would argue, no, it's not. Some would argue that, yes, it is. You indentured servants are only indentured for a set amount of time. And then once they work off the money that they borrow, then they are free. Okay? We had it here in the United States alongside slavery. I'm not getting into that issue. We should have had neither. Neither should have existed. Because both are very rough, both are very hard, and there isn't a true benefit to it, to my way of looking at it. Because oftentimes, at least in the colonies, like an indentured servant was not any different than being in total and complete servitude. Okay? But I'm not here to argue that. We're here just to read through this. So knowing the difference. So they talk about here at the beginning, where they said, we have a lot of children. Let's indenture them. So that way we can have grain so we can eat and live. So yes, it is important that they had food. I'm not arguing that point. However, their justification was, we've got plenty of kids. We can indenture a few of them off. That then leads you to, okay, so how much food did you actually need? Enough that you were willing to sell your children for it, apparently. Know the difference between a want and the need. You need to pay the electric bill. You do not need alcohol and cigarettes. You need to be able to go to the grocery store. You do not need to go to the expensive grocery store. You need to make sure that you have appropriate clothing for the weather. You do not need to shop at Macy's. You can shop at Goodwill or Savers or another consignment shop and have perfectly good clothing. You need to be able to put food on the table. You do not need to have everything ready-made. That is a want, that is a desire, that is an ease of convenience. McDonald's does not replace, that pot of soup that could be on your stove. That would actually last you longer and is probably actually cheaper for you. Wants versus needs. Know the difference. And it's important that if you are in a position within a church, or you just have the financial advantage of being able to assist people who might be financially disadvantaged, it is okay to say no if they're asking for help for a want. It is okay to say no. When you can, you need to be able to say yes to the needs. That's why it is important that if you are a member of a church that you tithe, because the church does have the ability to give and to filter through a lot of that's with multiple people. That is really a role of the deacon in a church. So, and it takes a lot of the sole responsibility off of a husband and wife or a single individual or just a family. Additionally, help other people make solid financial decisions. if someone comes to you and they're asking for your genuine opinion, give a genuine opinion. Don't tell them like, oh yeah, go buy this expensive stuff. Go do this or go do that when they clearly can't afford it. Don't encourage them in a direction that could get them into financial problems. Help them look, if someone genuinely asks, help them go through their budget and figure out what can I afford versus what can't I afford. What are wise decisions that I can make? Do I really need to buy this when I can also buy that? I'll be honest, I primarily shop at Aldi because it's cheaper, and even though it's getting expensive because of inflation, which I know Aldi cannot help, I know that none of the grocery stores can necessarily help that, but I shop at Aldi because already it is cheaper than primarily going to one of the larger chain stores. Now, I also, when I am able to, especially during like the spring and summer months through the fall, I like to go to the farmer's market. Do I pay more? Yes. Am I helping to support the local economy by shopping from farmers who are growing their own food and it's healthier for me? Yes. Sometimes you have to make the best financial decisions you can during that particular time, and it also sets an example for others. The second principle I would really argue here with that Nehemiah makes is do not have an attitude of entitlement. We have what we have because God has blessed us with it, and because He has given you the health and the ability to be able to work hard in order to earn the things that you receive. Now, I am not saying that you earn everything that you do get, but God does give you the ability to show up for work. I make my own money. I have a paycheck and I have a full-time job that gives me different benefits. I am working. But I am able to work and I have the job that I have because God has blessed me with it. So it all goes back to God. Your position in life does not mean you get to abuse that position. I love to listen to podcasts. I do listen to a variety of different podcasts. One of the podcasts that I do listen to really deals with abuse within the church, which the church is beautiful and she's lovely and she is full of people who are broken and who are sinful and who have been saved by grace and people who are searching. But there are also people in the church who, because we are sinful, they do some really bad things in the church. And if you have ever been hurt by the church, I am so sorry about that. I have been hurt by the church as well. I have experienced my own forms of trauma that have come out of growing up in the church. However, I still love the church and I know that she is here because that God wants her to be here. That being said though, leaders in the church, you do not get to abuse your position as a pastor, as a deacon, as an elder, as a Sunday school teacher, and that extends to any form of ministry. You do not get to abuse the power that you have been given. When you do, that is abuse. You do not get to do that, and you need to repent if you realize that you are abusing others, and you need to listen to people when they come to you and say that they are being abused, especially within the church and anything from outside of it. If you work for a church, I'm sorry, you are a mandated reporter. If they come to you for any type of abuse, it has to be addressed and it has to be addressed appropriately. There is a forgiveness, there is grace. You need to know when to extend it and when not to extend it. And you do not shame the person who is the victim in the abuse. Don't do it. Some places that I think would be really good to go and hear some more stories. I'm not sponsored by any of these podcasts, but Bodies Behind the Bus, they, I think, have recently become we're like a non-for-profit now. And I believe that they have different resources that are now available for people who are going through church trauma or have been spiritually abused by the church, or who have experienced other forms of abuse as well, and it hasn't been handled properly within the church. They're a good place just to check out. Like I said, I am not sponsored by them at all. I'm much too small, and they need their own sponsors. So they're worth going and listening to just to hear stories and how they're like different people are healing from the things that they've experienced. But that is a good place for you to go and just check it out. And use your position to help others, not hinder them. That should be implied. And just because you can do something, that doesn't mean you should do something. I look to verses 14 and 15 through this, and that really drives home that there are always consequences for our actions. Just because we are able to do something, and it might be a good thing, we do have to think about what the domino effect is going to be of that. And that's why before you make a major decision, seek God in that decision, go to wise counsel, and get different viewpoints on it. Don't go into an echo chamber to make a decision. Go to someone who might regularly disagree with you and talk it through with them, because a lot of times they're just approaching it from a different position from you. And sometimes they're going to agree with you, and sometimes they're going to say this is why I don't agree, and it's X, Y, and Z, and that's why I don't agree with you. It's really healthy. Now, we tend to think of consequences as bad versus good, or primarily as being bad, but they can be good as well. Consequences can also be, hey, the church grew. More people got to hear the gospel, and we got to see people come to Christ. Hey, we've had more baptisms. Hey, this decision, it really hurt a lot of people. Consequences can be good or they can be bad, but you need to look and see the whole picture. And God blesses those who don't abuse the position that he has given them. That's verse 18 in Nehemiah. Each day, 1 ox, 6 sheep, 6 choice sheep, and some fowl were prepared for me in this case being Nehemiah. An abundance of all kinds of wine was provided every 10 days. So that's an abundance, it's a blessing. But then Nehemiah says this, but I didn't demand the food allotted to the governor because the burden on the people was so heavy. Nehemiah was in the position where he could have demanded that he be given certain things because he was appointed the governor. He chose not to do that because he knew it was going to be a burden on the people. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So a lot of these are things to really think about. Definitely, it is geared for the Christian, but I think it speaks most strongly, though, to people who are in positions of leadership or who are in positions of power, because there were definitely times, while I worked in administration, as far as within an office at the director level, that there were times I could do things simply because I did have the authority to do them. A lot of times, though, I chose not to do them. I really wanted my office to think as a team and have everyone feel as though they were contributing to the team and helping make decisions. Now, I know there were some people who would get their feelings hurt or because I wouldn't go along with their decision, but that doesn't mean I didn't consider it or I didn't hear it. The point was I still brought them to the table, so that way I was able to hear what they had to say and take their opinions into account. But ultimately, I was the person who had to make the decision, and I had to go what I thought was really the best one. But things that you really need to consider, are you in a position to do things that can have long-lasting consequences, whether good or bad? Are you in a position now where you can financially help or hinder someone? Do you know the difference between what needs for yourself so that way you can help other people? And are you in a position where maybe you are abusing your authority? I would say take a hard look at yourself and find out and ask, am I doing something that I really shouldn't be doing? Because sometimes we have blinders onto ourselves. Introspection is a real thing. We should really think about what it is that we are doing. But that's really all that I have for today. So I look forward to seeing you guys all next time. And hopefully that you enjoyed this short little study as we looked at Nehemiah chapter 5. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys all next time. Bye.